Nicola Sturgeon has finally emerged from her bunker and, looking like a politician on the edge, she flatly denied throwing her successor Humza Useless under the bus, saying that her resignation had nothing to do with the bombshell investigation into SNP finances.
I think Humza's doing, in very, very difficult circumstances, an outstanding job. I have become ever more convinced than I was already convinced of this, that he's going to be a very fine First Minister. I understand the view that some people might have, that I knew this was all about to unfold and that's why I walked away. Nothing could be further from the truth. I could not have anticipated in my worst nightmares what would have unfolded over the past few weeks. I believe the SNP, notwithstanding the real difficulties that surrounds the party just now, is in good shape, and I think Humza will take it to even better things.
Really, Nicola? Because here he is, giving the most bizarre defence against the Sunday Mail's bombshell report that police are on the hunt for SNP burner phones.
Ever used a burner phone?
No.
Have you ever heard of anyone in your party talking about burner phones?
No.
Would you be extremely surprised if that turned out to be the case?
Yes, but it depends. I mean, for example, when you run a campaign, instead of using your personal phone, people might well buy a new SIM card and a new telephone number and make that the campaign phone number. So it depends on your definition of what you mean by a burner phone. So,
well, burner phones are about anonymity, aren't they? They're usually seen as something that people use to cover tracks.
So if it's that, then of course I'd be surprised.
Goodness me. He was speaking after he had met the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for the first time, during which he had the gall to ask for another separatist referendum. And commenting on the meeting, a spokesman for the SNP said the First Minister raised concerns around the UK government's attacks on devolution, including comments on devolution from Lord Frost. So, of course, the Tory grandee and Brexit mastermind caused quite a stir last week when he made this bold appeal to put failing devolution into reverse. And to respond to some of the attacks he's received north of the border, I'm delighted to say that Lord Frost joins me in the studio now. So, firstly, I guess your response, Lord Frost, to the fact that the Scottish First Minister actually raised your column with Rishi Sunak. Have you heard from the Prime Minister? Is he trying to stop you talking about this?
No, absolutely not. And I think there has actually been quite a lot of private messaging, not from the Prime Minister, but from sympathisers in the party who say, keep talking. This needs to be said. And it's always nice to be talked about. But I think what I've learned is that I've touched a nerve, and that some people think we do need to talk about this.
And tell me why. Is your case that the SNP have done such a bad job of governing Scotland? I mean, and they have literally driven this nation into the ground, that it just proves devolution doesn't work? Because I guess the fans of devolution would say, actually, you can't blame the system, you've got to blame scheming Sturgeon. I
mean, obviously, the SNP are interested in independence. They're not interested in governing Scotland well, and we've learned that. That's absolutely clear. But the bigger problem is that conventional wisdom across all the parties for the last 15, 20 years has said the way to defuse independence, to make it go away as an issue, is to give more devolved powers to Scotland. And we've done that time and time again. And what has happened? It's got worse. Independence has got stronger, the SNP has got stronger, and I think we have ridden that tiger long enough. It's come close to dismembering the country, and it's time to stop and have a proper debate about, does Scotland need all these powers? Does it need these powers to raise taxes, be a sort of semi-independent state on the world stage? I don't think so. I think it's reasonable they should have the powers to administer Scotland fairly and reasonably. They don't need more than that.
Because you could see over the COVID pandemic just how concerning these powers could be. I mean, there were times when Sturgeon was literally proposing some sort of border between Scotland and England, for example, to stop the pesky English people bringing COVID into the country. I mean, that's insane. You can't put any form of border between a country, can you?
I mean, and of course, the SNP were running their own sort of immigration policy during the pandemic as well. Nobody thought that devolved powers were going to mean that. But the trouble is that one thing leads to another. And the SNP, they believe in independence. They use every lever they've got to say, well, if you just give us this more power, this one more power, we'll be able to make this other one work well, and so on and so forth. And before you know it, you're a long way down the slippery slope. And we are very unusual in this country in even contemplating independence for part of our country. So I really think that it's time for us to get a grip and constrain the debate, constrain the powers, and try and move to a different place.
And also, they really had a decent chance, didn't they? You know, you can't say the SNP haven't had the time or the support from the Westminster government in terms of funding to turn the nation around. And they have actually done the total opposite. Doesn't matter whether you're looking at the health system, whether you're looking at the education system, whether you're looking at standard of living. On every metric, the SNP have failed Scots.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, public spending is quite a lot higher per head in Scotland than it is in England, and it's English taxpayers who fund a lot of that difference. And yet the services are a lot worse, and that's because they're not interested in running the services well. They're interested in stoking grievance and saying, we don't get enough money from London.
And often using taxpayer money, by the way, to stoke grievance, which is, I think, particularly outrageous.
Absolutely. And, you know, having their own sort of mini embassies around the world funded by the taxpayer to promote independence. None of this was envisaged, and none of it should be happening, and we should be much tougher.
No, indeed. But I think it's fair to say, though, it isn't just folk within the SNP who you've upset, because, of course, you have been attacked by Tories, by MSPs, even the leader of the Scottish Tory party, Douglas Ross, actually attacked your call to put devolution into reverse. What's your response to Scottish Tories?
Well, I think they need to see the bigger picture. To be honest, it isn't about tactics, it's about strategy and the future of the country. And I'm afraid Scottish Conservatives have failed to lay a glove on the SNP for the last 15 years. Some of them even voted in favour of this wretched gender reform bill that's caused the crisis. You know, we need to take a step back. It isn't just about winning 1 or 2 extra % in the next Scottish election. It is about the future of the country, and we need to think, have Scotland got the right powers? Are they administering them well? And we should be serious about that.
What do you make of the fall of Scheming Sturgeon? Because it's hard to think of any modern British political figure who went from having a cast-iron grip over her party, over the entire political system of her nation, to being so humiliated, destroyed, with a legacy now that I think is totally damaged.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, obviously, we can't really comment on what's going on within the
Not in terms of the police investigation.
The investigation and all of that. But I think...
But I'm talking political.
What happened to her, I think, was she sort of ran into a brick wall. When the UK government finally said, and the Supreme Court said, there isn't going to be another independence referendum, when the government said, this gender reform bill is not going to go through, that was the end. She kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and when she realised there was nowhere else to go, it produced the crisis. And that's what the lesson, I think, that needs to be learned. We need to be robust. We need to say, so far and no further.
And a word on this continuity candidate, the bloke who I call Humza Useless, who was the most incompetent minister in Scottish politics. Every portfolio he went into, he caused catastrophic damage. He got the gig because, bizarrely, Sturgeon and Peter Murrell, now arrested, backed him. But he's not up to the job, is he? And this is so worrying for Scottish people.
I mean, if you look at what a few senior figures in the SNP have been saying, even on the record, they've been quite lukewarm about Humza and his achievements. So I think there is a lot of nervousness and edginess about whether he can take the party forward. I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he doesn't last that long, to be honest, and that things change, which is a reason to look at the constitutional structure and not just the party. The SNP has been around for a long time. There's a lot of support for independence in Scotland even now. They may yet reinvent themselves. They may well be back. This chaos may not last. That's why it's important to look at the big picture, not just the current politics.
And so, if you were Prime Minister, how would you deal with it? What would you actually do? How much would you curtail? Do you need to put it to some sort of UK-wide referendum? I mean, how do you reverse devolution in practice? So
I think we should look at other devolved administrations around Europe, many of whom manage with many less powers than Scotland's got. We do need a debate. I don't think you need another referendum in Scotland. The only referendum in Scotland, other than the one on independence, was in '98. All the other increases in powers have just come through legislation. They all depend on the Westminster government, and I think it's entirely reasonable to draw the boundaries, have the discussion and legislate. And I think if we take that on, we would find that quite a few people would be willing to go with us.
Lord Frost, very powerful argument. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.
And, of course, an important legal note, the allegations surrounding the SNP's finances are denied by all parties involved. The police investigation is ongoing and no charges have been brought against anyone.